Let's look at SQL injection and how it could possibly cause you irreversible loss of any of your data, as well as exposing any data that you have stored in your database. So we know that when we process any kind of data for a user, sometimes we have to put that within an SQL query. That's natural. But if we don't protect against SQL injection, and we'll talk about what that is in a moment, then what we're doing is we're allowing the queries that we actually write to be transformed in some way. So what we're going to be doing is looking at a very basic example of resetting a password. We enter an email address, we hit recover, that looks the user up in the database. Obviously we need to pass that data into the database query to actually retrieve any information, and then we just go and reset the user's password. We're not going to be doing that, but we're going to be looking at how we can delete this other table in our database. So let's take a look at the database structure first of all. I have a users table here that has an email, password, and username. I've got 2 records in here just at the moment. And what we're going to be doing is entering an email address, checking that exists. We have a forum topics table, which doesn't contain anything. We're actually going to be deleting this via this form. So we're not going to be touching the database at all. We'll pretend that we're an attacker and we'll construct a query that will delete this table, which is pretty serious. So SQL injection then is the ability to inject something into a query to modify how that query runs, either by adding additional data or modifying it in such a way that actually perhaps when you log in, this will allow a user to log in even if they don't have an account, or sign in as an administrator. So this is just one example, but the overall concept is the same. It's protecting yourself against this kind of attack. So let's jump straight over to the code. We're going to be writing out the code that actually takes this email address, puts it into the database, and then we'll go ahead and look at how we can protect ourselves. So the first thing to do then is start out with a form where we can actually submit some data through. You can download this file as part of the course downloads. So up here we have a database connection. All that's doing is just allowing me to read and write data to this database. We've selected the database name, which is website. So make sure this is up and running, change your details here, or just write out this code from scratch. So what would be the first thing we'd normally do? Well, we would check if this email field exists, and then we'd maybe take that and pop it into a variable, like so. So we now have the value of email. So we'd then maybe construct a query. It really doesn't matter which database solution you are using. I'm using PDO just because we can change the drivers and connect to different database types, but you may be using MySQLi or something else. So the query then would be something like select everything from users where the email address equals that email that we have just grabbed from that form. So we have 2 single quotes. This is really important to note. And then all we do is just put that value in there. So that's email. So this will give us back either no record at all or a record if an email is found. So what we can do is a quick check, and we can just say if user row count, and then we can just kill the page there and say send email. So this is where we'd send an email to the user to reset their password. We're not going to be doing anything else but this. So let's actually test this out then. You can see we have alex@codecourse.com and billy@codecourse.com. So let me just enter a valid email and hit recover, and you can see send email. If I type something that doesn't exist, we don't see anything. We're just taken straight back to this form, obviously because we're on the same page. So we've got the basic concept working. Now let's inject something into that query and delete this table. And you can play around with this after you're done with this example, and you can try and modify data. You can try and extract data if you want. It's entirely up to you how you play around with this. But like I said, the concept's the same. So let's just kill the value of email. Now, normally that would just be an email address. So we just enter our email address, hit recover, and we're done. We can see that. But what happens if we change this to look like a query? So what I mean by that is the value of email here is put straight in. So let's build up this value that's going to cause the SQL injection. So it's a single quote, and then it's a semicolon. So let me just zoom in here so you can see. And then what we're doing is we're going to say drop table forum topics. We're going to do a semicolon and then a dash dash to say that we've ended the query. So let's copy this value, and I'm going to hit, well, I'm not going to hit recover just yet. I'm going to explain why this will work. So this is the value that, oh, actually we can submit it because we're killing the page. So this is the value now that's being sent through. We have everything here. Now I'm going to just copy and paste this into here where we would actually inject the value. So I'm going to paste that in. So what's actually happened here is we're now running two different queries. The first query is select everything from users where email equals empty string. Now this query won't return anything. However, because our secondary query is just plain as sight, it's just drop table forum topics, what's going to happen is MySQL will say, well, this didn't return anything. I'm going to run this anyway. And then we end everything just there. And we're actually just dropping the table. So you can see how that value being passed in is changing the way the query looks. So let's get rid of that and put the email value back in, and let's go and run this query. This is the fun part where we actually get to run it. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to paste this back in and hit recover. So it looks like nothing happened. Obviously we didn't find any users, but now if I go and refresh my database, you can see that the forum topics table has been deleted. So this is pretty serious stuff, and we need to know how we can actually protect against this, because it's one of the most common forms of attack, and it's funnily enough the most easy to prevent against. So with PDO, we have the ability to use something called prepared statements. So instead of running a raw query with just placing the value in, we're going to create a prepared statement. There are other ways we can actually do this, but prepared statements generally are the best thing to do, rather than using the escape function as part of PDO, because then you're going to end up with a lot of messy code. So we're not going to look at that. You can go ahead and look at it if it's appropriate to you, but let's create now a prepared statement. So I'm going to delete this. This is no good. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say user equals db. This time we're going to say prepare. Now we're going to enter a query into here. So we're going to say select everything from users where email equals. This time what we're not going to do is place the value directly into this query. We're going to put a question mark or a placeholder. So I could say email. Now this isn't actually going to run the query. This line here won't execute the query. It's just preparing it ready for us to execute. Now what we can do is we can say user execute, and in here we can pass an array of the placeholders and their values. Now what this will do is PDO will automatically escape these values for us, so we don't have to worry about SQL injection. So the key name is the name of the placeholder. So whichever value you use here, we're going to use just inside of here, and then we're going to pass in that value there. Done. So now what's happened is the query has been executed, and we can carry on as normal and check if there's a row count. So let's do this just normally. Let's enter an email address and see if we get that killing the page. And we do, so we'd send an email there. But now let's paste in that value that we saw earlier. So we need to recreate our forum topics table again. So I'm going to hit add there. That's created that table. Hit recover. Nothing happens because obviously something failed. But when I refresh now, you can see that table is still there. So there we have SQL injection. It's one of the most commonly found problems with security. However, it is the easiest to actually protect against, as we've seen here using prepared statements.